for hyper-local news. Broadcasting live online, this is Carmarthenshire Talk Radio News.
Welcome along. Jason Mohammed ran a show today on BBC Radio Wales talking about the small school closures. Abersoch, the village school there, 97 years of age, and that's under threat of closure as well. Closer to home here in Carmarthenshire, Mynyddygarreg School is also earmarked really for a proposed closure, and campaigners are trying to fight that as well. In the studio we have Sue Woodward, who is one of the campaigners, governor at the school, and who appeared on the Jason Mohammed show today. Sue, you told Jason about obviously the issues that we have within Mynyddygarreg and the school there, the financial constraints the council are citing and so on. We've covered this at length in the past. Has anything changed? Have you been updated on a timescale for the closure, proposed closure?
No, we haven't had any information from the council at all. The consultation period, I think, as people might know, was extended because of COVID, and the school had been earmarked for closure at the end of August. That didn't happen because of the extended consultation, but we're now in a position of limbo, really, where we haven't had any information about the new proposals, the new timescales, and when the council's cabinet will be looking at the results of the consultation.
Did you listen to the parents' concerns in Abersoch?
Yes, and I think, to be honest, the sorts of things they were saying were exactly what we've been saying about the heart of the community, how a small school is a must for keeping the community together. And, everybody, all the callers that rang in, were all virtually saying the same thing, that, the heart of the community is being ripped out when small schools are closed.
Obviously, the one of the main issues coming through on the questions was this comparison. Look, you've only got 7 children here, you've only got 30 children here, or we're dealing with 35 children in a class, and that kind of questioning, really, does it have validity, or is it just it's proportionate to where you live, to the kind of community that you're in? We shouldn't all be lumped into Llanelli schools are there because they've got a massive rural population and they can fill those 5 times over. This is a village in the middle of nowhere with no services, nothing at all. And what they're trying to do is squeeze the village out almost, isn't it? Pipe it into a bigger village, a bigger school, a bigger community. What does that do? What does that tell you? Yeah,
they're very much operating a one size fits all. I mean, once you start looking at how much it costs to run a school, if you decide that there is a certain cost that needs to be met, then obviously rural schools are always going to cost more to run. They have less pupils by the very nature. They're in a rural area. There are not going to be as many children. And so you can't really compare the cost of a small school with an urban school. But because they are doing that, and because that's the way that the schools programme seems to be set up in terms of finance, and we all know that local authorities have been squeezed on their finances for many, many years now. Because they're doing it in that way, it means they're trying to fit more small schools into one larger school to get their costs down, and it doesn't work like that. And of course, really what they should be looking at is funding for small communities, because you can't just take a school in isolation and say this is funding for that school, because that small school in a community, when it's the only amenity, does a lot more than just provide education. It provides that, but it also provides the hub of the community. And really, I think Welsh Government need to start thinking, okay, are we funding communities, and should we fund communities better, which includes the school, and not separate them out, because you can't separate them out, because they're there for the community.
Greta Thunberg was in the news today and giving her speech. I don't know if you saw that, the blah, 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 the words blah, 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 and she constantly made this thing blah, 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 talking about climate change and politicians and, people who make these decisions. Looking at Mynyddygarreg School, I was there this morning, the water was pouring down the path, the lane is being washed away there, water was coming through the wall. I imagine this, we know the roof has been leaking, I don't know if it was leaking today. But it's sort of, when you look at it, you think, this school has had absolutely zero investment. And one has to question, has that been, we've talked about it before, has that been a deliberate long-term plan, non-investment, to ensure that, the nail is put in the coffin of this last bastion of community provision in Mynyddygarreg?
Yeah, I mean, quite possibly. Who knows? But what we do know is the school hasn't been repaired. There hasn't been the funding put towards it. And then it makes the decision easier to say, let's close it, doesn't it? Because you can say, oh, the school is such a wreck. There's no possibility of repairing it without spending a lot of money. So we may as well invest in a shiny new school. But you've got to think about everything else. We've talked about community earlier, but it's not just community. The council and Welsh Government have a raft of other policies, all of which, if you start saying we've got to close schools, impact on those. We've got things like, if you take aside the Welsh language, you've got the net zero climate and Greta, and you've got the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and you've got active travel. All of those things can't be reconciled by closing the school. They all conflict with closing a school and keeping things rural and keeping things in the community. None of it makes sense. And if you do one, then you're going against the other. And I do think councils and governments need to think in that way and really line themselves up a little bit more cohesively.
And we heard in Abersoch that they were looking at innovative ways of attracting more people into the school. Forest schools, a beach school, Cilchmaethrin, TRV. Some of those things are happening within Mynyddygarreg. You've certainly got the Cilchmaethrin with Cara Young saying, look, there's as many children in the Cilch as there are in the school. But the age limit that we have in the school disallows those children to be counted, and yet they're there in a room next door.
Yeah. And the age is a real problem for Mynyddygarreg and for lots of small schools in the area. In fact, when we looked at the figures, I think the larger schools are able to take children at age 3. The smaller schools can't take them to age 4. And what happens then inevitably is, as soon as the children reach 3, they get taken to another school. That puts another nail in the coffin of the small school, because we've lost those pupils. Once they go to a different school and they're settled there, then they're not going to come back. And parents can't afford to do that. If they're working, they need their children to be going to school. So we're suffering, and our numbers are suffering because of that. Of course, all those children in that Maethrin, if they were all to come into school, we would have much more argument for being able to finance the school better. And for showing how popular the school is, because it isn't because those parents necessarily want to leave Mynyddygarreg School. It's out of necessity, because when their children turn 3, there isn't an option for them to go into school at age 3.
Do you think that this is a case of, a council determined willfully to push through this closure, no matter what you say or do, no matter what the evidence, no matter what the facts are, no matter what the emotional pleas are from the people of Mynyddygarreg, the children of Mynyddygarreg, this is going to go ahead and, to hell with you?
Oh, it's difficult to call, isn't it? The councillors have been saying, no, this isn't foregone conclusion, that they will make a decision based on all the things that we've been talking to them about. We don't know. A part of me holds out a little bit of hope that will happen, because we have got all the evidence and information and everything on our side. It's whether the dogma takes over and they decide to hell with it anyway. But really, they should be listening to communities. Communities are what they're here for. They get elected by communities to serve communities, and they should take note.
Sue Woodward, many thanks for speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your local radio station, Llanelli Talk Radio.
With Sarah Davis, who's a parent at Mynyddygarreg School. Sarah, you were on the Jason Mohammed show this morning, and he gave you a couple of minutes to get your point across, and you mentioned your two children attending there and your son who went to a large school and found it difficult. Do you think that small schools have a future? And, given a lot of the problems we're seeing with young people who've gone through large schools, bullying, mental health issues, do you think we should retain them? I mean, Jason was talking about fighting for them. Is that what it is?
It absolutely is. We have a duty to provide our children with the best possible start, and having gone through the experience with my eldest son of the larger schools, and that was Welsh medium as well, it just didn't work. I felt that it was too large a class. It was 35 children, I believe, and he just was lost. He was lost. He didn't have the confidence to speak up if he was struggling. It was easier to copy. Whereas in Mynyddygarreg, the smaller numbers in this community means that the teachers easily identify anyone struggling to begin with. And, they gain in confidence with their friends in small peer groups. And I think that's just priceless. It's setting them up for life.
The argument Jason seemed to be putting forward really was, look, there are people who are paying their council taxes and so on, and they're going to be sending their children to a school with 35, 40 children in a class, and they're going to be scratching their heads saying, why should we contribute? Why should we pay? Why should we fund, a school with so few children?
Yeah, I do understand that, and there's arguments for that all across life. I scratch my head every time I look at the council tax bill for Cadwally Ward. But, this is a rural small school, and there are certain protections that have been offered to other small rural schools that Mynyddyg, didn't benefit from, which again raises a question right there. But, we're on the outskirts of Llanelli. Some of the larger schools are back, in the busy populated areas, hence the larger numbers. And they have had, their funding come through for many of them to increase capacity, bigger areas and things like that. Which, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I don't think bigger classrooms are the answer, but each to their own. And this is where I've chosen to live. And this is where I've chosen to send my school. My neighbours, their children go to Gwenllian schools. And that's their choice, that they've chosen to go for larger numbers for their own reasons. It just doesn't suit everyone. And I don't think the Education Authority should be looking at a one-size-fits-all when it comes to our children's education.
The lady in Abersoch, Margaret Jones, said, look, they're moving this school, as they would be with Mynyddygarreg, they're moving this school to a field. And she said something quite interesting. She said, when you're here at the school, in the village, anyone that comes here, visitors, whoever, people in the community, grandparents, they will hear the Welsh language living, breathing, spoken. The only people that will hear it, the only things that will hear it after this would be the sheep in the field. That was quite an extraordinary comment, really. Is that the case in Mynyddygarreg? We know Cara was saying and Sue was saying, look, the whole school meets in the park sometimes, on a sunny day, especially in the summer. We've been there ourselves. All the children are there, all the parents are there, or the grandparents are there. I have concerns, I'm getting older. that is probably the only place I will be able to go to meet people. You know, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, you're right, Alan. You know, it is. I'm not from Mynyddygarreg. I moved to Mynyddygarreg nearly 8 years ago, and everyone I know is as a result of the school. All of my friends, you know, I was held up in traffic last week. I could put on our mum's group, can somebody collect the children? And they took them to the park, because the park is the natural next phase of the day is, you know, everyone goes to the park if it's dry. And I can't imagine doing that in my son's school. I can't imagine sending a text and asking, can somebody pick up my son? You know, whereas in Mynydd, I don't even feel embarrassed that I'm not there. It's like, oh, I'm running late. Can someone grab them? And it's just, it was done, you know, and that's beautiful. And I can't imagine where else we'd have that. At the top of the hill there, you know, they've got a field of donkeys behind them. There's always a red kite lurking, you know, just above the school, and the views of Caldy Island, and it's all just breathtaking. And you know, myself and my husband, we put a marquee on that grass, and that's where we got married, because of the views. How do we compare just location alone in moving those children down to the brick wall of the back of the co-op? You know, it just seems madness. And
also, you're looking at we heard about the policies, you know, the contradictions in policies, the climate change, the zero carbon and so on, the walk to school, the active travel. Does it seem to you that people are just brushing these off? They're not considering them, or they're considering them and saying, well, that's not really, doesn't fit our plan here, you know?
I think we're all missing it, Alan. You know, when we spoke to the Education Authority and we asked the question, does Mynyddygarreg need to close for Ysgol Mynyddygarreg to have the new school? And the answer was no. And yet, you know, here we are, it's all still on hold with them too. I do think they're reluctant to spend on the small school because they've already got their sights on something bigger. With regards to, you know, the car pollution and everything that the bypass, you know, just lately, just looking on a community forum, you know, the lighting has been questioned. There's zero support coming out from, I feel personally, from Kidwelly Town Council, you know.
Do you feel quite deeply for the people in Abersoch, having heard the news today that that's it, the death knell has, you know, sounded, they are going to close that school, and no matter what those people try to do?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I just think there's so much history gone there. But I feel as well, you know, for the children, because I know how, particularly one of mine has, you know, it's created an anxiety that just wasn't there. And it's not just the threat of the closure, it's how long it's taken, you know, this waiting game, the lack of communication, the lack of just, you know, communication within perhaps the school to say, you know, don't worry, we know it's all been looked at, we're thinking of everything. And I just don't think there's any reassurance there. So for Abersoch, you know, those children are, well, you know, they're so small in numbers as well, and it's just the great unknown to them now, isn't it? It's
the council are obviously going to meet, and then it will be a case of there's the presentation, there's the report, let's have a show of hands, and that will be it. Some people will object, some will abstain. Some will say there's conflict of interest, like we've heard from one of the local councillors, that their daughter or somebody works in a school. Do you think that's as good as it's going to get? And what message or plea would you have for those people in that meeting that are deciding by just sticking their hand up in the air?
Well, have heart. That was my main one, back to when we were begging for, you know, an extension. Just have some heart. And okay, the area may be, you know, tourism heavy in the purchasing of houses and things like this. I understand that, but there's also development and there's also community, and there's too many places in Wales now are losing community, and right in front of the councillors' eyes. And I hear a lot of them saying, oh, it's such a shame, it used to be. Well, you're part of the used to be. Let's change that. Let's not used to be, or Mynyddygarreg used to be this, or Abersoch used to be this. Just be part of the ones with, the strength to say, actually, this is the community and this is what we're going to do to support the community. I bring it back to Mynyddygarreg, but, the building site down on the front, there's new homes, new children potentially, this side of the bypass. When votes are made, please consider everything, future development, consider all of these options, especially in Abersoch. Are you telling me that there's going to be no future developments in that area when, it's thriving?
Well, that's the thing Sue mentioned earlier on, was that, look, the consultation has taken place, how many months ago? I can't remember. Was it 6 months, almost a year ago, during the pandemic? So things have changed in Mynyddygarreg since then. Obviously, there may be more children in the school. There may be far better negotiations with the Cylch Maithrin to get the age limit up so they can be counted within the school. That would take it to almost 60 pupils in the school. The campaign group, I think, have put a business plan together, certainly budgeted what it would cost looking at that, and those should be considered. So do you think that, that there should be, again, additional time now, given that, this was so long ago, and it's only now that we're really having a chance to see people, meet people, get face to face?
Yeah, so I guess, we're all starting to come out of our homes again, and restrictions are obviously eased a lot. And, yes, as well, with our business plan, do we need another meeting, consultation with the Education Authority based on the new business plan? What are they still putting in front of the Executive Board? Because the original document, well, I have to call it fictional because the numbers were inaccurate. There were so many inaccuracies to push for the new school that it was just a frustrating read. And yet when I called them out on this, it was sort of brushed under the carpets. And now my frustration is, what are the Executive Committee going to read? Has it all been amended? Will they have our business plans? We don't get to see, or maybe, closer to the time we will, but I just feel it's still a bit in the dark before these hands are raised, yay or nay, in what they're actually looking at. So we did a couple of freedom of information requests that just proved, that the numbers were inaccurate. There was, especially on the numbers of children, leaving Mynyddygarreg on a daily basis to go to school elsewhere. Well, actually, it wasn't up in the 90s, like you first said. It was, considerably less, and it was more in the 40s. And the majority were seeking English education, so they were never going to be students of Mynyddyg.
Do you think?
But yeah, there's the people here to make a community, and the people here to make a school, and our business plan proves that, because the numbers are increasing, not decreasing.
Great. Well, thanks for speaking to me. I shall see you at the school, no doubt.
Will do. Thanks, Alan. Good night.
Carmarthenshire first for hyper-local news. Broadcasting live online. This is Carmarthenshire Talk Radio News.
I'm with Cara Young, one of the parents and the governor at Mynyddygarreg School. Cara, you were on the Jason Mohammed's show this morning on Radio Wales, and you talked about issues surrounding the possible closure of Mynyddygarreg School. It was a programme really looking at Abersoch as well. The decision has been made to close that school today. How do you feel about that? And do you think, that's kind of a signifier for what's going to happen to Mynyddygarreg?
It's really sad. I wasn't aware of that they'd made the decision until you just said, so it is really sad. And I feel for them up there. But I do feel that every case is different. We must, all the different communities are different. And I really hope that we can still fight to save Mynyddygarreg.
They mentioned, Margot Jones was on, and she was questioned by Jis Mohammed, and people were phoning in and giving their opinions. The majority were supportive of the small schools, and the general consensus, the main points really seem to be that this was ripping the heart out of a community. These people who are responsible for the decision making and the proposal really to close, and it was a proposal. It was based on a premise that the school was going to close, not how can we affect change here, how can we modify, how can we adapt. Given that that's the kind of premise that it's started from, do you think that anything you can do now is going to sort of cease this will of the people who we pay and who we elect to represent us within the county of Carmarthenshire?
You would hope so. You'd hope that we do still live in a democracy, and that these people are actually listening to us. These people who are running the county and are in charge of our lives, basically. You really do hope that they are listening to us. It's very easy to give up and be pessimistic and think, oh, there's no point, but we have to try and fight it. The schools in the area have faced closure, small schools, and they've been able to remain open, such as Bankfors-Felin, for example, and that is open to this day. A few years back, they were in the same position as we're in. So I just really hope we've got to stay optimistic and really hope that the people in charge of the county listen to us and look outside the box. Don't just accept, we'll close the small school and create the large school. Why can't we think outside the box and look at different options?
I think I work a lot with mind maps, and I look at something and I put the main issue in the centre of that, and then I look at it and I try and cover all the angles, and I create all these little boxes around it, the influences, the do's and don'ts, the whys, the why nots. And when you take something like Mynyddygarreg and you look at, let's just say we're looking at the section on policy, Welsh Government policy. Well, in there you would put climate change, carbon zero targets, Welsh language targets, active travel targets, all of those things. And on the other hand, then you put the county council's policy to close this school, and then you'd sort of put boxes to say travelling further, more cars, less people on bikes. Do you think that they see the contradictions? Do you really think they see that?
I don't think they do, because if they did, then this proposal perhaps wouldn't be happening. You named a few things there, like the net zero carbon. That's the plan to be by 2030, I think it is. Well, by closing Ysgol Mynyddygarreg, you are going to increase the number of cars on the road between Cydweli and Mynyddygarreg and Cydweli. A lot of parents walk to school now and cycle to school. They wouldn't be able to walk on that main road where part of the road there isn't a pavement. There isn't a pavement wide enough to hold your child's hand. Yeah. And then we've got the bypass. We get to the bypass. That road is so busy. There's no safe route across that road. No. Are the council going to look at a pedestrian bridge or another way of crossing that road which would be safe? And how much is that going to cost?
Well, you're looking you're looking also at things like, Lee Waters asking us to plant 80 million trees and to it's better for our lungs and healthier for us. Well, we have a school that's surrounded by trees, and yet they want to move the children away from the surroundings of the trees into a more urban area. It just doesn't sit well, does it?
No. And when we consider where the school is, we have a field across the way with rugby posts. We have the hall with a big stage. We've got the multi-use games area, which is quite new. It's only, I don't know how many years old, but it's not really old.
No. You got the new garden coming
behind. Yes, we've got a garden within the community that's being built now. We've got the mountain behind the school. There's fields of donkeys up there. There's alpacas. What other schools in the area have got those facilities on their doorstep and the children can use it?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense at all. It's such a good educational environment for the children to be.
If we look at that section, and let's say we're looking at this mind map with the council, and we're saying, look, here's the issues here, and let's look at the standards of education. Let's look at small schools versus large schools. Let's look at, not to compare to compete, but just look at the facts here. This school has achieved green status, excellence, over the years. Teaching the Welsh language is phenomenal. You've got children who are coming in without a word of Welsh, and within a year or so, they're fluent Welsh speakers. Carmarthenshire County Council are very passionate about the Welsh language. Again, if we look at that mind map and then we say, okay, give us what your policies are, let's put them down. Give us what your passions are, put them down. Well, again, it sits well with keeping the school, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. In relation to the Welsh language places, the Welsh Assembly want 1 million speakers by 2050. Without Ysgol Mynyddygarreg there, they're going to lose the Carmarthenshire that runs from the school. That Carmarthenshire feeds the whole Pwllheli area. They haven't got anywhere else to go. They haven't been given a place in the new school. And, this raises a separate issue because the Carmarthenshire isn't part of the school. It's a separate identity, but it's within the building. And surely that, it's thriving, and that is going to affect Welsh medium places within the area. As well, if you close Ysgol Mynyddygarreg, you're removing 55 Welsh medium primary places in the area. With a growing village as well. Houses being built left, right and centre. There's plots for sale. There's a big housing development on its way up. The LDP, there's loads of areas in Mynyddygarreg within the local development plan. It just does not make sense.
There's also an assumption, I know that I can't remember if it's you or Sue mentioned, there's an assumption that if the school closes, all the parents from Mynyddygarreg are going to send their children to this new school. That's not the case, is it?
Mm-hmm.
They would probably look for another small school.
Yes, a lot of the parents of Mynyddygarreg have chosen Mynyddygarreg on that basis that they want to send their children to a small school. I know I've spoken to a few that don't speak Welsh at home. We are one of those parents. We don't speak Welsh at home. And I'm not sure whether we'd feel comfortable sending our children into a larger school. Just because of the Welsh language part of it really, but I know that a lot of the parents have said, it's not a guarantee that they're going to send their children to the larger school. They may look for smaller schools in the area.
It comes down to a show of hands. And how confident are you? On firstly, do you believe that it's wholly appropriate and right that that's what it comes down to, a show of hands for the future generations of this village?
To be honest, before I became involved with this whole fight to save Ysgol Mynyddygarreg, I didn't have much of a clue about politics. And I realise now how political every decision is. And I don't think it should be based on what party you're joined to. What you vote for. I'm voting for them because I'm part of this party. I don't think it should be down to that. I think they should look at the facts, look at the area, look at the community, listen to what people are saying, and then make a decision, not just based on what political party they're assigned to. And I really do hope that they do listen to us. The fight, we've fought and fought and fought, and we are passionate about keeping the school and keeping it in the community, keeping Mynyddygarreg alive, and making it a success. I think it's brought our community closer together, and like I said, we're building a garden within the community, and I think that's on the back of fighting to keep our school and making. It's easy to plod along and not realise and take things for granted, but it's not until you're threatened with the loss of something you realise how important it is. And I think with the threat of the loss of the school, I think it's made everybody within the community stick together and come together and fight to keep it. And we will make it a success. Why can't we just keep Mynyddygarreg open? The original school building, I know it's been changed, but instead of moving everybody to a 21st century school, we've got the history there. Why close it and turn it into, we have no idea, houses or whatever? Why not keep it and maintain it? It doesn't make sense to me.
Putting sort of emotion aside and looking at the facts and figures, have you got anything new, or are you satisfied that what you have really is good enough to make a case? As Mark Drakeford said, the assumption is that the school will remain open unless the council can make a very good case for its closure.
I think the things that we've asked for in our business plan, they remain. We want children to be able to start in Mynyddygarreg at the age of 3. We want the school to be brought up to standard by the council asking for some of the 21st century grant money to maintain the school. That money isn't only available just to build new schools, it's to maintain and upgrade older schools. That's what we're asking, and we still think that is viable, and it will, putting the community aside, it will maintain 55 Welsh placement education places within the area. It will maintain a good standard of education for those children in the area. So I do feel that, we still have the arguments to keep it open, and we can make it viable.
Beating heart, wouldn't there, that you'd be able to gather with your parents. I know your mother goes there, and she chats with the young mothers and the young fathers and the children, and everybody talks to the children, each other, the parents, and then the park becomes another extension of the community, and people look out for one another. It's not as sort of cold and anonymous as some of these new schools are. All well and good, they do what they do, and people are happy with them, and they seem to do okay. But this really is an intrinsic link, a timeline, isn't it, through generations of families?
Yes, definitely. And when you consider the well-being of future generations and the Act, the council should consider the impact of this closure and what the impact would have on the communities and the well-being of the communities. And I have no doubt that it would affect the older generation, because
I can't see a lot of the grandparents sort of risking that run down over a bypass, travelling those distances where at the moment they just walk from the farm gate, they walk down the lane, they witness the 4 seasons in the cycle of the 4 seasons throughout the year by walking to school with those children and grandchildren, and it's something to get up for and go out for, isn't it?
Yes. And they attend the Harvest Festival in St Tyler, Christingle in St Tyler's Church. Up in Horeb Chapel, they'd attend the Christmas concert, and those things won't be there anymore.
No worries. Well, thanks for speaking to me, and good luck with the campaign.
Thank you very much.
Your local radio station, Llanelli Talk Radio.